Well, welcome to the Canadian Embassy in Belgium.
Thank you. Very much.
It's a great pleasure to have you here this morning. When we learned that the foundation established by your mother and was the one winning the Baudouin Prize for Africa, the Baudouin Foundation for Africa, we thought, well, you know, that's something we basically it sort of forces people to open their eyes, and we were not really aware of the good work that you and your mother and all your collaborators are doing in Somalia, and so we were quite curious to learn more. So we read a bit. We read a bit about the foundation, the work, and all that. But and last Friday, I was invited to attend the ceremony, and wow, it was a very nice ceremony. But you spoke very well. I think your mother and yourself were able to explain to a much larger audience about the challenge and that you went through, and basically the successful path that you were able to establish. So congratulations from myself and from all the embassy staff.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very happy that you got to be there. And I think that's really what the prize does too, right? It really unlocks the foundation's network to an audience that otherwise would not be aware of our work. And I think that it's nice for people to experience it both at that grand ceremony, but also through the different bilateral meetings that we've been having to really put our cause and the work that we're doing on the EU agenda. So we've been having many meetings, and it's been quite the ride. And as you know, Canada has been a big part of our personal and professional journey as well too. So it's particularly an honor to be able to also sit with you here today and to share more about our work.
Thank you. Well, well, there's no structure to this to this meeting. It's rather informal, and we thought to call those like conversation with the ambassador, and so it's like it allows us to talk the way we want and to give it what we want to give, and one of the aspects I wanted to relate your work now to your Canadian upbringing, and I wanted to ask you you've lived in Canada, now you live in Africa, in Somalia. What do you what do you keep as or what do you keep as Canadian values? Like what do you think that Canada has influenced, on what aspect of your life or thinking that you think that Canada has influenced you?
Well, I'll tell you this. I mean, I was born in Somalia, and I left when I was 2, and then spent a couple of years in the refugee route, and then we got asylum in Canada in 1999. So I was still quite young, and always considered myself Canadian. Growing up, I didn't feel, a challenge assimilating or integrating. I think that's very unique about Canada in comparison to other countries where there's a lot of refugees where they settle. So all my life, I felt really Canadian, but with a sense of responsibility, really much evoked by my mother at a very young age, in me and my sisters, that we had a responsibility and an opportunity in Canada. But I think one of the things that I really took away from my upbringing in Canada is that my ideas are valid, that I can enter any room with confidence and share my ideas, and Of course, gender inequality exists everywhere in the world, but I, excuse me, I left Canada. I went to Somalia with this empowerment that I could contribute to the meaningful transition out of conflict. I didn't even consider for once that my age, my gender would be an impediment as strikingly as they were when I first went back to Somalia. So I think that I definitely held on to that empowerment that I felt in Canada when I returned to Somalia, maybe to my own detriment and challenges at first, because I do remember very boldly standing alongside my mother thinking, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to change Somalia. And then men literally walking out of the room. And then learning to quite humble myself and, learn from my mother practices like leadership from behind, recognizing that there are traditional and cultural barriers for women and you can't just come in there storming into every room. And so that was a learning curve for me, definitely. But I also saw that by holding on strongly to those values that, I, as a woman, I should be able to participate in any process. And that really motivated my work on empowering more women and girls. That this is not just a luxury for those that live in Canada or something after conflict, that is part and parcel of building peace. So I attribute a lot of my thinking and the freedoms I experienced to the kind of new Somalia I want to contribute to. And I think that's something that sticks out to me the most.
And do you find that it's sort of a daily challenge to sort of move those values forward in an environment which is more conservative, which has not been exposed to, let's say, all the transformation that Canada went through during the last decades, from the 60s, where like there was a lot of progress made, allowing women to work and take place in society and lead society. And so is this something that is, I would say, unusual, or are you, like in Somalia, or you looked at somehow of foreigners who brings new values? Or?
Not anymore. I mean, I think that it's a lesson that I took away personally, but also one that I share with any new actor that wants to really influence in challenging harmful social norms, that you can't just come into any community with ideas or solutions. But what we have experienced excuse me, over the years is that there has been a growing women's movement, that these ideas and values that we champion for are not foreign to Somalia. They've only been lost during the war, and they're one generation young that they've been gone. When I look at photos of my mother when she was in university with her high-waisted jeans and aviator glasses, and I'm thinking, what Somalia was that, where women and men went to university for free together? And there's a lot of things that get lost during the war. And that's been protracted in Somalia now for 30 years. So I have both a lot of hope that you can turn the clock backwards a little bit, because of the demographic that we're dealing with, 78% of the population is under the age of 30. And a majority of that is under the age of 15. So we're looking at... It's a very young country. It's a very young population. In that comes the promise of, the malleable minds of young people. And that's why we explicitly, focus on young women and youth and children, because by exposing them to these values of equality, of pluralism, of justice, and an enabling environment that anyone can really choose their own path at such an early age, I think that we can turn the clock back a little bit on the things that we've lost during the conflict. So these values of women's empowerment are not new to Somalia. They've just been put in the back burner during conflict. I remember when I first returned in 2010, me driving a car was considered, something that they never saw before. I'd have men actively, banging on my windows, and I would not be able to drive my car by myself. But that's not something that was foreign 30 years ago. So now I can drive a motorcycle. And that also still comes with a little bit of risks, but, we're pushing the boundaries every day. But there's also this huge youth culture that is incredibly connected, digitally connected, using social media, have access to information. And because that barrier of access to information or exposure has been removed because of the digital divide, I'm not looked at as a foreigner coming in with these ideas. There's a lot of diaspora that are coming back with their own values, but also a lot of youth that have never left Somalia that now have the opportunity to be more critical thinkers and have access to information. So what we're championing for is not considered an outside perspective, and we try to localize human rights with culture and tradition so that it doesn't look like it's an externally brought in ideology. And I really do feel that because we are rooted at such a grassroots level and are really engaged with the community and share the same hardships as them, that our values, we wear them on our sleeves, and anyone who joins or supports our cause knows what we stand for. No.
That's a great answer. That's and what would you consider to be sort of the greatest successes so far for the foundation?
I mean, I think when we look at success and impact, if we were to look at just the numbers alone, it's quite significant. But I think that the real success comes from individuals coming to our center, arguably at their most vulnerable or their most destitute situation, women coming to our safe house, and then leaving empowered and actually being a part of becoming ambassadors for our programs, for our mission. A lot of our safe houses are now being sustained by survivors themselves. We opened our first rape crisis center in Mogadishu in 2010, and now we have 9 across the country. And each time we go further and further out into more acute areas to really decentralize our services, but to really cement them into the community. We work with women themselves, survivors that have gone through our programs, to be part of sustaining the facility. And to see how, even when we don't have funding, that women are able to rally around the center and bring the private sector on board, or even add their own funding and really take ownership on it, is something that we're quite proud of. I think that the progress we've been able to make with fostering relationships with the various incoming and outgoing government on ratifying the Child's Rights Convention and having standard operating procedures where they have voluntarily pledged and agreed to hand over any child that is captured at the front lines to our care for rehabilitation and reintegration. It's also progress that we are quite proud of, that collaboration between government and civil society. I'm also quite proud that some of our best practices in Somalia are now being used to influence community-based reintegration practices in other newer and emerging conflicts, and really to see that local actors like ourselves in a country that's still facing a lot of challenges is now being viewed as a source of solutions as well, and not just a place that you have to go fix. So there's many things I think we can be proud of, but I think what I'm most proud of is that the vision that my late father had for the Elman Peace Center of building peace and ordinary people coming together is one that's not just upheld by my family, my mother and I, but we've had incredible people join us from all over the world and are part of the team, and they take the same risks that we do and really are all coming around this mission because they truly believe in it. And it's been really encouraging to see how we went from just, my parents, 2 people just trying to do their part, and now growing into this institution that is driven by a collective of compassionate, driven, professional, but really deeply invested into the progress of Somalia. And to be at the helms of that is quite humbling.
And what would you describe to be the greatest challenges?
think, there's a lot of challenges, and I think that the only constant in Somalia is change. And unfortunately, with every little bit of progress that you make, it's such a volatile situation that it's hard to sustain some of that progress, where you take one step forward and take two steps backwards because of the security situation as well too. So it teaches you as well too that everyone is expendable. So we've invested a lot in institutionalizing Elman Peace, so that, God forbid anything else happen to me or my family, that that it is something that anyone can join, and that we have a permanent footing, that anyone can be a part of this movement, that can sustain anyone's lives. So I think security is the biggest challenge that we face right now, but there's progress that we're seeing in that sector as well too. It's a challenge of remaining hopeful sometimes. We lost my sister in 2019, and that's really what also drove us to really figuring out how do we sustain this beyond a person or an individual, so that it can be something that people can join from all over the world forever and be a part of peace. And we started to invest in building our own compound. It's all green, we have solar panels, and really trying to reduce any kind of overhead or administrative costs, so that it can remain a fixture in Somali society. If anyone wants to be a part of building peace, that they have an institution they can turn to. So the challenges are far and near, Ambassador, but I think that we're all in the business of selling hope, so we continue to bank on that.
Yes. You mentioned the empowerment of women, and your mother, yourself, your sister, or models of women's leadership. What role do you see for women and moving forward in Somalia? Like, it's been it's been a country that has been torn by warlords, and we know, well, Canada has learned that we need to bring women at the table if we want to find a real solution, and that's why Canada is one of the first countries that has given itself a women's international what is it called?
Foreign feminist policy.
Yes. So you've heard it definitely, that because women do represent 50% of the population on the planet, if not more, and we need to have women in every field of society, and including in government's office and at a very important negotiating table. So is this something that you see yourself, or groups and colleagues, or in Somalia? Is this something achievable?
Absolutely. We're making a lot of progress towards that as well too. I think actually right now, for the first time in history, we have the first acting Somali president who's a woman. Because today, yes. And it's acting, but because the newly inaugurated president is on his first international trip. So we have a lot of hope for this administration, but there's been an incremental improvement in the role of women in the public space in Somalia. But we know globally that, when women are involved in peace building and negotiating peace, and when they're involved in political processes, society becomes a lot more safer for the entire community, and not just for a select few. So promoting women's rights and their participation is a fundamental priority for us, and it should be for all governments, we believe, and not an optional second. And there is that progress happening as well too in Somalia. We have a quota system, which I think is quite important for really creating that influx of women into political participation. And women like my sister are also breaking barriers by being in leadership positions within the military, but we really do champion for more women political participation, so that women that don't have access to these spaces can really have representatives that care about their issues, championing them in the rooms where decisions are made, that can really ensure that, you know, the average girl or, you know, woman from the IDP community is represented in policy and legislation reform and security sector reform. That can really only happen when there are women that really champion that for them. So there's progress happening, and I think that there's a movement right now that we're seeing that has taken off so rapidly just in the last 12 years in Somalia. So even when women are being systemically excluded still from being a part of the processes that ensure their well-being, they are not waiting to be invited to this proverbial decision-making table. They're creating their own tables on the margins, and they're literally marching outside and really trying to be a part of the process. And I think that that's taking up a lot of momentum right now.
That's great. That's great. When we see countries that are sort of torn by war, we have, I think there are quite a few examples of Libya, Afghanistan, where there were, let's say, Western intervention and trying to modernize the country, and not sure whether that was those models were very successful. We saw like what's happening right now in Afghanistan, and looks anyway that you know, it's very difficult to turn around centuries of culture trying to put a model in place. And you mentioned that in Somalia, the let's say the solutions are coming from the inside, from the local population. And so what do you see any role for outsiders to play in Somalia? Or do you think that it should be more like the solution should come from the agreements between people to develop their own solution?
Yes, both. I mean, I think that right now what Somalia needs is definitely support from the international community. And, you know, as you know, Somalia has been going through many different cycles of conflict, of humanitarian crises, of different type of, you know, geopolitics. There's been a lot of challenges over the last 30 years. And there's been a lot of interventions that have been tried and tested by the international community. But where we are right now is a very rare and unique moment of time in Somalia, where we have a transition of government, where we have a peace that is within reach now more than ever before, that everyone sees, to the point that the average young man has refused to be. There's a time just a few months ago where we were really close to political violence because the outgoing president wanted to extend his term. So to make sure that his term was not extended, political candidates were going and knocking on doors to actually mobilize young men in Mogadishu to pick up arms and to forcibly take the then president out of the presidential palace. And then the youth were saying no. Because if I pick up weapons for you right now and fight for you because you're my uncle or we're from the same tribe, and then we burn down Mogadishu, essentially what you're asking me to do, I will lose this little bit of privilege and stability that I have now come to know that allows me to go to the beach or go to restaurants. And there's a lot of infrastructure development that's happened in Mogadishu in the last couple of years. So for young people to actually say, I won't benefit from burning down the city, but you are prepared to ask me to do that for your own political gain. And that's not something I want to participate in. So that's something we're seeing as a really interesting moment to really leverage and continue to build on right now. We're also seeing that with this peaceful transition, thankfully it didn't turn out violent. There was a peaceful transition that happened to sustain this momentum that we have right now. Even presidential candidates that did not win are working with the current president right now until he forms his cabinet, until this, you know, because there's still a lot of spoilers that are in the capital, to kind of go through this transition peacefully. Youth, civil society groups, the private sector, everyone just wants to benefit from the peace that's within reach. So there's a collective action right now. But if the international community does not continue to keep Somalia at the top of its policy priority and support this new administration, especially right now when we are on the brink of a looming famine, where it's projected that hundreds of thousands of people are going to die in the next couple of months, and a lot of the aid that was supposed to go to Somalia is already being redirected to other crises. We fear that there is this unique moment of time to really support this peaceful transition into becoming the road to democracy will be lost. So there's definitely a major role for the international community to play right now. And we know that there's 56 active armed conflicts in the world. And one of our main messages here in Brussels also has been that it's important to continuously keep your eyes and your money on all of the different situations that are happening and not just divert them all to the one that's closest to home. And we're feeling the impacts of the Ukraine war on the divestment of aid and support from the international community in Somalia. But at the same time also, to avoid a situation like Afghanistan, like you so rightfully pointed out, where a community has been so dependent on international and external support that once they pull out, they don't know what to do anymore, is that we need to have a parallel investment on the civil society, on communities, on movement building, so that we can be in a position to hold our governments to account at the same time that the support is going towards the institution building. So I think that the way to avoid a scenario like the almost overnight pullout in Afghanistan, or what we saw most recently during COVID as well too, at the beginning of COVID, when a lot of the international aid actors and all the expats and all the diplomats all left because no one knew what that really meant, what COVID was going to manifest into. The people that always remain are the local actors. So working with them in tandem is always what we always push, and there's definitely a value add for everyone. But doing it together and looking at local actors as not just implementing partners or beneficiaries of external aid or of international engagements in Somalia is the kind of shift that we're looking to uplift and mainstream.
And last week you were awarded the Belgium Foundation Prize for Development in Africa. What does that mean for the Elman Foundation?
Well, it's an incredible honor to be able to receive that. So to receive that award, and it's definitely given us a platform that, at a time when there's so many challenges the world is ravaged by, and the outlook is very grim, and the global trust deficit is growing, and countries are going more unilateral, it was an opportunity to kind of bring a multitude of actors together and to, I think, show that there is still hope in this kind of darkening world that we're living in. And that's some of the feedback that we received, and we were happy to have been able to kind of re-inspire activism and that renewed vigor in maybe policymakers that have lost sense with that. But for us, it's given us both a platform for continuing our advocacy, for more people to come to learn of our work, and to see that there's ways to get involved with our cause. So it's been a whirlwind, to say the least.
And here in Brussels, has it opened doors for you?
Absolutely. The foundation has kept us very busy, but it's been good busy. So it, really opening up their network and, hosting meetings and events, really to give us the space to speak about the issues that we focus on in Somalia, but that also have international impact. And looking at how international diplomacy and international discourse that's happening here in the EU is also having impacts in Somalia. So we've the prize has not only just put Somalia at a center stage in the EU and in Brussels, but also globally. And I think that that's the kind of positive news that we really benefit from when we go back home now to Somalia to continue the momentum. It was definitely a nice recognition for all of our staff that couldn't be with us here in person. And I think for everyone that's fighting for peace, you often just keep your head down and you do the work and you forget that there are people looking and watching and cheering you on, and that in itself is it's a very nice feeling. Yeah.
Was it reported in the local media and on social media over there?
Very much,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
We even got congratulations from the new incoming government, and I think a lot of the Somali diaspora were very proud, and I think it's really nice to be able to be a part of changing the narrative that's plagued Somalis for centuries. I mean, most people, when they think about Somalia, they think about either Black Hawk Down or Captain Phillips, or those kind of like depictions, but being able to put Somalia in the news for a positive reason is part of also changing how people invest and support the country's development as well. So I think there was a collective sense of pride, and to be able to contribute to that, I think it was very important. Even growing up for me in Canada, the only news really I would see about Somalia in mainstream media was one of suffering and conflict, and as first generation, there's both a sense of recognizing that this is my native home, and then I grew up in Canada, and the only depiction I ever saw of Somalia being one that was really negative. It also made me think about how does the diaspora now begin to view Somalia, and I think that seeing yourself in it, seeing other young people being part of the rebuilding of Somalia, I think is going to inspire more young people to also get involved. And that's something that responsibility we don't carry lightly on our shoulders. So to be able to contribute to that new positive image is something that the foundation has given us an opportunity to do so.
Well, you're certainly a pioneer because, I think the easy path for many would have been like you move to Canada and you stay there forever. Whereas your family, your mother, decided to go back and to give back, and to with the goal, the objective of improving society. So that's just phenomenal. That's just phenomenal. So congratulations for that. And I'll finish my series of questions by asking you, like, so what are your dreams? Like, what motivates you to move forward, and where would you want to be in, let's say, in 5 years?
5 years is a perfect time, actually, because I think in 5 years we want to be, when I say we, I think in Somalia, we want to be able to have democracy, to be able to have not a system that is inherently patriarchal or inherently exclusionary as it is now for young people, for young women to be able to participate meaningfully and openly. And I think that is achievable in the next 5 years, but that requires investments in civil society, in programs, in civic education, voters education, and institutions, but also in movement building. So I would like to see that accomplished in the next 5 years. I would like to see more women being a part of the political processes and actually continuing to, support other organizations to overcome the challenges that we did by sharing our lessons more broadly. So just in the last 2 years, we've been able to scale our work from Somalia alone to Nigeria, Niger, Uganda, Burundi, Chad, Cameroon, DRC, but throughout the Lake Chad Basin and the Great Lakes region, just sharing our lessons and really building a network. And I want to continue to scale that. And the idea is that, not necessarily being the only organization to be able to do that, but decentralizing our services and creating bigger networks of support. And yeah, so we have a lot of ambitions and goals for the next 5 years, but really it is to be able to not just constantly advocate on the margins or on the periphery, but really being included meaningfully. And yeah, so I'm very hopeful for the next 5 years, and hopefully Canada can be a big part of that process as well too.
Well, should there be, let's say, more democratic process in Somalia, I think there's certainly a place for you around the table, because you're very articulate, you communicate very well, and I think everywhere we need more people like you, so that we can exchange views without having recourse to other means such as violence or to impose idea. Sharing ideas and trying to influence is probably, it's the way democracies operate, right?
In diplomacy.
Exactly, and when there's, let's say, when diplomacy is sort of removed from the process, it becomes very difficult, and we see it in Ukraine right now. Like, there's a bit of democracy going on behind the curtain, but the guns are still speaking for themselves, and anyway, I'm not sure what's the future, and some people are talking about long-term conflict, which is not very inspiring. Anyway, I thank you very much for the time you've spent with me, with my colleague this morning. Thank you very much. And well, I've spoken a lot. We've spoken a lot. I don't know whether you'd like to share some.
Maybe just let you know, maybe confirm that, of course, you're still well connected with Canada, but we will organize a more formal trip to Canada, also with my colleagues from KBF Canada. And before that, or at the latest at this occasion, I think set up a philanthropic means channel for Canada-based donors to support very efficiently, tax efficiently also, Elman Peace Center. The same for the Europe, so for the Canadian diaspora, if I may say, or expats here in Europe, they also have the opportunity, the capacity to support Elman Peace. And maybe just let you know when you will release the clips or the things I just record. And for the rest, we will have a more global conversation. That's for later.
I think that, I'm not sure, how big is the Somali diaspora in Canada. I'm from Ottawa, and I know that there's an important diaspora in community in Ottawa.
I grew up in Ottawa as well.
Oh, is that right?
I did, yes. In Westboro.
In Westboro?
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I thought you were probably from Toronto.
I know, people assume that, but no, I grew up in Ottawa. But there's the big, I think most Somalis are in Toronto or in Edmonton. But there's a significant Somali Canadian diaspora. Yeah.
And so I think, other than Kenya, Canada's got the highest number of Somali diaspora worldwide. So very strategic partnership.
Yeah.
And in the last government, we hope to see that replicated soon. In the last government, I think that within the cabinet and in Parliament, we had a huge number of Canadian Somalis in the largest number of Canadian Somalis in Parliament and in the cabinet.
Yeah.
I think there were about 7 at some point out of 20. So.
Oh, that's
quite significant. Yeah.
So there's hope that the Canadian way of doing things might influence, might find some influence.
I definitely think so. Yes.
Well, I guess looking at how Canada operates with lots of diversity and different languages, different ethnic groups, and same thing in Belgium, where we can see that it's sometimes it's very complex, but at the same time, it does allow people with all kinds of objectives and different views to speak together, to bring them to different parliaments and to find solution that works for them. So I'm not sure what's the model for Somalia. I think Somalians will have to propose it and find it by themselves, but allowing this diversity to speak. The different ethnic group to be represented is probably the way that will peace can be achieved and progress can be achieved.
Yes, and that's what we're working towards. And you can see that in the Canadian cabinet as well too, in the minister cabinets, that the refugees, like Somali Canadian refugees, like Minister Ahmed Hussein, who served in different positions. You have the Minister of Defense, you have the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, many different key strategic ministries that are led by people of different backgrounds in Canada. And I think that model of being able to come from a very different background but still be able to equally and democratically participate and be in a leadership position in the Canadian government is something that is truly an inspiring role model for the world, and something that we hope to see also change in Somalia, and maybe not in the next 5 years, but eventually.
Yeah. Yes. Well, we here we report to the Department of Foreign Affairs and International Trade, and in terms of what we do and in terms of what we project in terms of image of Canada and who we are, is essentially that we all our intervention initiative here or sort of have this background of diversity, of gender parity, of so we all have different sort of not, I would say, more like guidelines that if you go if I'm invited to a panel, I can ask, are there going to be women? Are there going to be people of different ethnic group represented in the panel? So that we can sort of force changes everywhere, even in Western societies where sometimes, we know the absence of women, and we know the absence of different groups, because society is made up of all kinds of individuals from all different ethnic groups, gender parity, and so that's really something that we try to project.
There's a long way to go, I think, globally for gender parity and true equity, and we see that represented not just in Somalia, but there hasn't been a single woman signatory yet to any peace agreement. If you look at just some of the security conferences around the world, like in the Munich Security Conference, it's all still men. Surely towards the end of this month, with the NATO meetings that are going to happen, you're going to see very little representation of women or youth particularly, or those coming from the global south. But it's a challenge globally, and I think that we need to keep at the same pace of championing these issues at the grassroots, but also being honest with ourselves of how well we're doing globally too on reaching gender parity, bridging the gender pay gaps and looking at what true equality looks like. And this plight is not one that is unique to us in Somalia, but of course when you are in a context of an armed conflict, it is further amplified.
We try, and you might have noticed, like in Canada right now, I would say the three most powerful position in the ministry, in the different ministries, are held by women, with women being for the first time Minister of Finance, women being Minister of Defense, women being Minister of Foreign Affairs here in Belgium, and women also being Minister of Defense, and we see a greater number, and hopefully, it will bring, let's say, different voice, different solution at tables. Yes. So that's really great. So thank you very much for coming this morning. Thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Merci.